Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. When I first saw our home with its white picket fence and shimmering backyard pool, it was like stepping into a dream. Jack and I were going to fill this house with love, laughter, and the joy of a family. But dreams like summer mirages can fade now as I sit alone by the pool, the water still and silent, reflecting only my solitude. I wonder where it all went wrong. Jack comes home late, his eyes distant. Our conversations shallow. The warmth we once shared feels like a distant memory, replaced by a chilling gap. Tonight I've decided to confront the silence between us. But what I discover will change everything. Do we still have a future together, or has our love drifted too far apart? You won't believe what happens next. I remember the first time I saw our house. The one with the white picket fence, and the backyard pool that shimmer like a mirage in the summer heat. It was the epitome of the American dream. Or so I thought. Jack and I moved in with dreams of filling it with laughter, love, and the pitter-pow of little feet. And for a while it was just that every morning I'd wake up to the smell of coffee brewing. Jack already up reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. His hair would be tousled, his eyes still heavy with sleep. But there was always a smile for me. We'd share a quiet moment before the day began. Our hands touching over the table, a silent promise of forever. Leo, our golden retriever, was the heartbeat of our home. His tail would thump against the floor, a metronome to our daily life. He'd follow me around, his eyes full of unconditional love, as I moved from room to room, setting the house in order. Our neighbors, Mrs. Jenkins and Mr. Thompson, were like characters from a bygone era. Mrs. Jenkins, with her perfectly set hair and her penchant for gossip, would often peer over the fence, her eyes twinkling with the latest neighborhood news. Mr. Thompson, on the other hand, was the quiet type, always tinkering with something in his garage, his presence more felt than seen. Life was a series of routines, each day blending into the next with a comforting predictability. But somewhere along the line, the colors of our life began to fade. I started noticing the small things first. Jack would come home later, his excuses growing more vague. The warmth in his eyes seemed to dim, replaced by a distant look that I couldn't quite place. Our conversations, once filled with plans and dreams, dwindled to mere exchanges of daily necessities. I found solace in my solitary walks. The neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and children playing, became my escape. Each step I took was a step away from the life I thought I had, and into a world where I could reflect on what was slipping through my fingers. The pool, once a symbol of our shared joy, now lay still, its surface reflecting my growing solitude. I'd sit by it, watching the leaves drift across the water, each one a silent testament to the passage of time and the drift in our relationship. One evening, as the sun set casting long shadows over our home, I decided I couldn't ignore the growing chasm between Jack and me any longer. I prepared dinner, setting the table with care, hoping that perhaps the act of sharing a meal might bridge the gap. Jack came home, his tie loosened, his steps heavy. He sat down, and for a moment there was a flicker of the man I fell in love with. But as we ate, the silence was palpable, broken only by the clink of cutlery. Jack, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever feel like we're just going through the motions? He looked up, his fork pausing midair. There was a pause, a moment where I thought he might reach across the table, take my hand, and tell me everything would be all right. Instead he sighed. Alice, I don't know. Maybe we are. That night after he fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The house felt too big, too quiet, and I realized I was more alone than I'd ever been. The next morning I woke up with a resolve. I couldn't let this continue. I needed to confront the truth, to find out if there was still in us, or if we were just three people sharing a space. As I walked Leo, the morning light casting long shadows, I made a decision. I would talk to Jack, really talk, not just about the weather or the neighbors, but about us, about where we were, and more importantly, where we were going. The walk back home felt different, each step heavier with the weight of my decision. I knew this conversation could change everything. It was time to dive into the deep end to see if our love could still swim in waters that had grown so still. And as I approached our house, the white picket fence no longer seemed like a symbol of perfection, but rather a barrier. One I was about to cross into the unknown as I walked through the gate. The white paint of the fence seemed to glare at me, almost mocking the illusion of perfection it once represented. Leo trotted beside me, his tail wagging with a rhythm that was both comforting and a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I knew I had to speak with Jack, but the words felt like stones in my throat. Inside the house was silent, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Jack was in the living room, his back to me. As he stared out the window, I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of the jasmine plant I had placed on the windowsill, a gift from our first anniversary. "Jack," I said, my voice steady. Despite the storm inside me, he turned, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." He nodded, his eyes searching mine for a moment before he gestured to the couch. We sat, the space between us feeling like a chasm. I've been thinking, I started, my fingers nervously tracing the pattern on the couch, about us, about where we're headed. Do you still see a future for us?" Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Alice, I don't know. I've been so caught up in work in my own head. I miss us, but I'm not sure how to get back there." The honesty in his voice was like a bomb, yet it also stung. "I miss us too," I admitted, my voice cracking. "But we can't keep living like this, like strangers under the same roof." He reached out his hand, hesitating before touching mine. "I want to try, Alice. I really do. Maybe we could spend more time together, just us, no theses." The suggestion hung in the air, a fragile hope. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart cautiously lifting. "How about a weekend at home? Just you, me, and Leo. We could reconnect. Maybe start with a pool day like we used to." The idea of revisiting our past joys felt both terrifying and enticing. "Okay." I agreed, the word feeling like a commitment to more than just a weekend. "Let's do it." The days leading up to our planned weekend were filled with a tense anticipation. I found myself walking more often, not just for solitude, but to clear my mind, to prepare for what might come. Leo, ever my confidant, listened as I spoke aloud, my fears, my hopes, and my love for Jack, which hadn't faded despite everything. During these walks, I noticed the subtle changes in our neighborhood. Mrs. Jenkins had started a new garden project, her enthusiasm for life undimmed. By time Mr. Thompson had finally finished his latest invention, a solar-powered bird feeder, which he proudly showed off to anyone who passed by their lives. So seemingly simple, made me yearn for the uncomplicated joy Jack and I once shared. Back at home, the atmosphere was charged, but Jack was making an effort, coming home earlier, engaging in small talk that felt like a bridge back to our old conversations. But there was an underlying tension, a silent acknowledgement that this weekend was more than just a break from routine. The morning of our pool day arrived with a clear sky and the promise of warmth. I watched Jack from the kitchen window as he set up the pool, his movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. Leo bounded around him, his excitement palpable, his barks echoing through the quiet morning. As I joined them, the sun kissed my skin, and for a moment the world felt right. Jack smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, and I felt a flicker of the old us. We swam, we laughed, and for a while it was as if time had reversed, and we were back in those early days of our love. But as the day wore on, the shadows grew longer and the laughter seemed forced. The pool, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now reflected our strained attempts at normalcy. "Jack," I said, as we sat by the pool's side, the water laughing gently against the tiles. "This isn't just about a weekend, is it?" He looked at me, his gaze intense. "No, it's not. I've been thinking, Alice, maybe we need more than just a weekend. Maybe we need to really work on us." The admission was both a relief and a new kind of fear. "I agree." I whispered, my hand finding his. "But how do we start?" He squeezed my hand, his touch grounding me, by being honest, by not avoiding the hard conversations, by remembering why we fell in love. The evening brought a chill, and we moved inside the house, feeling less like a mausoleum and more like a home. We cooked dinner together, the act of preparing food, a dance we had forgotten. As we ate, the conversation flowed more freely, touching on dreams deferred, on the life we had envisioned. But as the night deepened, so did the shadows of our unresolved issues. Jack's phone buzzed, a reminder of the world outside our bubble. He glanced at it, his face clouding over. I need to take this, he said, standing up abruptly. The door to his study closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the remnants of our meal. I waited the silence, now oppressive. When he returned, his expression was guarded work, he explained, but the word felt like a barrier, not an explanation. That night, as I lay in bed, the distance between us felt physical, a tangible space filled with unspoken words and unmasked questions. I turned to look at Jack, his profile outlined by the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Jack, I whispered into the darkness. Are we going to make it? He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. I want to, Alice, I really do. The words were there, but the conviction was missing. I closed my eyes, the weight of our future pressing down on me as sleep eluded me. I realized that our weekend had only scratched the surface. The real work, the deep, painful excavation of our relationship was yet to come. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I knew that the next morning would bring not just a new day, but a new chapter. One where we would either find our way back to each other, or acknowledge the end of our journey together. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm heavy with the weight of unresolved tension. Jack had left early for work, leaving behind a note that simply read, "I'll be late tonight." The words felt like a cold brush off, a stark contrast to the warmth we had tried to rekindle the day before. I spent the morning in a daze, the events of the previous night replaying in my mind like a broken record. The pool, once a place of joy, now seemed like a vast empty space, mirroring the void in our relationship. Leo sensed my mood, his usual exuberance subdued as he lay by my feet, his head resting on my lap. As the days stretched on, the loneliness became suffocating. I decided to take Leo for a walk, hoping the fresh air might clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, the usual sounds of children playing absent, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. We walked past Mrs. Jenkins' house, her garden now a vibrant tapestry of colors, but she was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Thompson's garage door was closed, his latest project, hidden from view. The normalcy of their lives seemed to mock my own turmoil. Returning home, the emptiness of the house hit me anew. I found myself drawn back to the pool, the water still and inviting. I sat on the edge, my feet dangling in the cool water, watching the ripples spread out from my toes. Leo, sensing my need for solitude, lay down at a distance, his eyes watching me with a depth of understanding that only a pet can offer. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the water. When my emotions reached a crescendo, the silence, the loneliness, the fear of losing Jack, it all welled up inside me. A torrent of feelings I could no longer contain in a moment of desperate need for connection, for something to ground me. I looked at Leo, his eyes full of unconditional love, and in that moment I did something I would later regret. I reached out, my hand trembling, and in an act of profound confusion and emotional turmoil, I touched him in a way that was deeply inappropriate. The horror of my actions hit me like a wave washing over me with a cold, stark realization. I pulled back, my breath catching in my throat, my heart pounding with a mix of shame and confusion. I sat there staring at my hands, now feeling alien to me, as if they belonged to someone else. The water in the pool seemed to mock me, its surface now reflecting not just my solitude, but my darkest moment. The sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. Jack was home earlier than expected. I heard his footsteps approaching and panic surged through me. I quickly composed myself, wiping my eyes, trying to erase the evidence of my breakdown. "Alice." Jack called out, his voice carrying a note of concern, as he stepped into the backyard. He stopped short when he saw me, his eyes scanning my face, reading the turmoil there. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice softening as he approached. I couldn't speak, the words stuck in my throat, the weight of my actions too heavy to voice. Instead, I shook my head, tears beginning to fall. Despite my efforts to hold them back, Jack sat beside me, his arm tentatively wrapping around my shoulders. "Alice, talk to me. Please." "The dam broke," Jack said. "I did something terrible." I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper, his brow furrowed. Confusion and worry etched on his face. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, the confession feeling like a knife to my own heart. With Leo, I was so alone. so desperate for connection, and I touched him inappropriately. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack's face went from confusion to shock, then to a mix of horror and disbelief. He pulled away his eyes, searching mine for some sign that this was a misunderstanding. "Alice, what are you saying?" His voice was strained, his usual calm shattered. "I'm so sorry. Jack, I don't know what came over me. I was just so lost. So alone," I pleaded, my voice breaking. He stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth by the pool. This is beyond anything I could have imagined. "How could you do that?" "Alice, to our cute dog." The rift between us was palpable, a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. I watched him, my heart breaking, knowing I had crossed a line that might never be uncrossed. "I need time," he said. Finally, his voice cold, distant. "I need to think." He walked away, leaving me by the pool, the water now a mirror to my shattered reflection. The sun had set and the darkness enveloped me, a fitting metaphor for the darkness within. As I sat there, the night growing colder, I realized that the climax of our story had arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating implosion. The future was uncertain, our relationship hanging by a thread, and all I could do was wait. Wait for Chris to decide if there was anything left to salvage from the ruins of our love. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. Jack barely spoke to me, his eyes avoiding mine. Whenever we crossed paths in our once shared home, the silence was suffocating, a heavy blanket that smothered any hope of reconciliation. I could see the devastation in his eyes, the betrayal that had cut deep into the fabric of our relationship. I tried to reach out to explain the depths of my despair, the loneliness that had driven me to such an unthinkable act. But every attempt was met with a wall of silence, or a look of such profound hurt that it made me recoil. The house once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the emptiness of our broken bond. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Jack finally broke the silence. "Alice," he began, his voice hoarse, "I've been thinking I don't know if I can move past this." His words were like a physical blow. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. "Jack, I know what I did was wrong, unforgivable, even, but I was lost. I was looking for any kind of connection." In a moment of weakness, he shook his head, his face a mask of pain. "It's not just about what you did, Alice. It's about trust, about the foundation of our marriage. How can I trust you again? How can I look at Leo without seeing that?" Tears streamed down my face, not just for the loss of our marriage, but for the innocence of our beloved cute dog, caught in the crossfire of our human failings. "I understand, Jack. I've hurt you in ways I never imagined possible. But I love you and I want to make this right if there's any way." He sighed, a sound filled with years of shared memories, now tainted. I think we need space, time apart to figure out if there's anything left to salvage." The suggestion of separation felt like a final nail in the coffin of our life together. "I'll move out," I said, the decision tasting like ash in my mouth. "I'll take Leo with me. Maybe with time we can both heal." Jack nodded, his eyes not meeting mine. Maybe the next few days were spent packing. Each item I touched felt like a piece of our past, slipping away. Leo watched me, his tail no longer wagging with the same enthusiasm. He seemed to sense the change. The sadness that permeated the air. The day I left the house looked different, stripped of the life we had built together. I stood at the doorway, Leo's leash in one hand, a suitcase in the other. Jack was there, his expression unreadable. "I'll always love you, Jack," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I hope one day you can forgive me." He didn't respond, just watched as I walked away, the gate closing behind me with a soft click that felt like the end of an era. I moved into a small apartment, a stark contrast to the home we had shared. The walls were bare, the rooms echoing with my solitude. Leo, ever loyal, stayed by my side, his presence a small comfort in the vast emptiness of my new life. Therapy became my refuge. I spoke of my guilt, my confusion, my desperate need for connection that had led me down such a dark path. The therapist listened, her words offering a sliver of hope, a path towards understanding myself, and perhaps one day earning forgiveness. Months passed, and with each session I felt a bit more of the weightlifting. I wrote letters to Jack, not expecting a response, but needing to express my remorse, my journey towards healing. I never sent them, keeping them in a box under my bed, a testament to my regret and my hope. One evening, as I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker to life, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack. My heart raced as I opened it. "Alice, I've read your letters. I'm not ready to forgive, but I'm willing to talk. Can we meet?" The message was a lifeline, a chance to perhaps mend what was broken. I agreed, my hands trembling as I typed my reply. We met at a neutral place, a cafe where we used to go when we were dating. Jack looked different, older, the lines on his face deeper. We sat, the air thick with the past. "I've been thinking a lot." He started, his voice low, about what happened. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. But I want to understand, Alice. I want to understand how we got here." The conversation was painful, filled with tears and apologies. We spoke of our dreams, our failures, the love that had once been so strong. There was no promise of reconciliation, but there was a mutual acknowledgement of the complexity of human emotions, of the depth of our connection, that even betrayal couldn't completely erase. As we parted, there was no embrace, no declarations of love, but there was a respect for the journey we had shared. I walked back to my apartment, Leo by my side, feeling a mix of sorrow and a strange sense of peace. The story of our marriage might have ended, but the narrative of our lives was far from over. I realized that life, like the pool in our old backyard, could be still and reflective, but it could also be deep, with currents of change and growth beneath the surface. And as I looked at Leo, his eyes still full of love, I knew that while some bonds might break, others could heal and new ones could form. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape with lessons learned and a heart open to whatever might come next. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. If you enjoyed the story, this will help us create more engaging stories for you.